Hi, I'm Narayan from ADBO. I'm happy to share with you a video on Vray for SketchUp. At ADBO, we are providing training for SketchUp and Vray. We are the authorized training partner for SketchUp. In today's video, we will be taking you through the simple steps of getting into the newer version of Vray 3.6 and getting into your first render. About the requirements, as you know, we are using SketchUp and we will require the version Vray. You can either download it from the Chaos group as a trial version. The 30-day trial is available and we can use it for our testing purpose. The other part which is very important here is the hardware. You need to make sure the hardware is robust. Preferably a desktop is suitable. I recommend using i5 or i7 as a CPU, and you should be having a proper graphic card unit. The best version could be CUDA or Quadro series of graphic cards. Why we prefer desktop about the laptops? Because of the heat dissipation, so it gives you better output, and also the durability of the hardware is good in terms of lifetime. So let's start with the version. Here is the kitchen which I would like to take you through the rendering process. Before we start, there are a few things that we would like to take a look at the model, how it is. The important thing is the purge. You can access this purge from the model info and make sure all unwanted elements are removed from the model. Backhand, entire model goes into the memory of the Vray. So we have to make sure we clean up the model perfectly before we get into the rendering. The other important thing that I would like to check is the orientation of the faces. It's important to know whether we applying the material we have used all the front faces. There is a trick in the styles that we can use and check it whether all our faces are oriented properly. So if you go to the styles, you can set up the front face and the back face a different color. I'm changing it to the red color at the back so that we can clearly identify if there are any elements we are able to figure out in the presentation. As you see right now, we are not able to make out anything here because everything is shown with the shaded texture. So moment I change it to a monochrome, we'll be able to identify if there are any surfaces that we need to address. So now in our model, you might see that most of the first surfaces are looking correctly oriented except the one at the bottom, which is the floor that might require some kind of fix. So I will reverse this particular face so that it will orient the white surface on the top and the darker surface on the back. Once these settings are done, we can move forward with our rendering settings. Before you go further, it's necessary for us to make sure we add all required details in the model, such as the gaps that we want to see in the rendering, because rendering engine will make sure the light passes through each and every gap of this, and whatever the outcome it will look nice when we have these details in our model. So don't hesitate to add as much as details in your model, and it will be good in the presentation when you render it. As you see, there are several scenes created in this particular model. It's very important for us to identify if we have any of the elements that could not part of the scene but are loaded in the model and will cause delay in our render. Some of these elements could be high poly models, so we need to just quickly check if we have any add-on model or component which could affect our rendering. So I'm just quickly going through the remaining scenes of the model and checking if we have anything on this particular model. Okay, I'm finding it. There is a model on the component over here which is high poly model, which could impact our modeling because this is not part of our scene 1 but it is in the scene 5, and we need to make sure it is not affecting our rendering. So the way how I manage these things using the layers, so we go into the layer and we will create a layer. Let's call it as hide me. So we know we have hidden this particular element, so we create the layer. We will assign a layer to this object. There you go. So this object is in the layer now of hide me. So we will go back to our scene 1, okay, and in the scene 1 we will make sure the hide me layer is off. So now we know that particular component is no more loaded in our memory of the SketchUp model. So what all elements we see here is going to get into the memory of Vray once you start hitting the render button. So we are all set to get into the Vray interface now. So these are the three things that we need to make sure. We purge the model, we check for the front and back surface, and also make sure unwanted elements are removed from the memory of the tool using the layer mechanism. When you install Vray, we should be getting the three toolbars. If you don't see them, you can access them by going to the view toolbars and looking for those specific toolbars that are installed. Please click on the checkbox and this toolbar should appear. The three toolbars, the one is the main toolbar, which is Vray for SketchUp, and the other one is the light toolbar. We're going to take a look at more closer look at these two toolbars. The third one is geometry toolbar. This being the beginner's toolbar, I'm limiting our scope to these two toolbars. The first one here is the asset editor, which controls most of the functions of Vray. After that, you see these two kettles. They are the render buttons. If you hit them, any one of them, the system will go into the render mode. So right now I'm not hitting them. After that, you have something called the viewport render. The viewport render is the current viewport, whatever we are seeing, that goes into the render mode. This is something new appearing in Vray 3.6. Along with that, we have Vray viewport render region. Region and viewport render works together. So once we switch on to viewports render, we can use viewports render. Now let's click on each one of them and see how they behave. So let me place them on top of it and start using them. This is, as I told you, this is the master tool which connects us to material, lights, geometry and settings. So in this panel we can extend either on the left or on the right. If I expand on the left, I'll be getting the material library that Vray has provided. They have provided a vast library which we can use in our presentation. You can even change the way they are being presented. This is the list view, and we can even change it to a grid view to see how the material looks. Whatever the material we want to bring in, we can directly right click on them and then bring them onto the scene. The other settings that I want you to take a look at this point of time is on the right side of the panel. You get more options that are controlling the material parameters. Because we are in the material, we are getting the material related parameters, but as we move on to the other subject like lights, you will see the right side panel changes and it is related to the lighting parameters now. So with the 3.6 version, you will see there is a left and the right panel appearing according to the choice what we do at the top. The next tool which you could see is the render. There are two render tools available. The one is for the production and one is for the test purpose. We can use test renders here, and remember, moment we hit it, the system goes into the render mode and it will take a couple of minutes to regenerate and show us how the render looks. For the test render, I will hit the test render now and we can take a look how the render will come out. This is quite dark right now because we haven't set up anything in terms of the lighting, and now we are seeing the interactive render mode. This is the infinite rendering loop wherein system will continue to refine the noise that are appearing in the model during the render, and we need to stop it so that once we are happy with the render, we can stop it so that render is discontinued and we can continue to improve the rendering properties. This is the Vray frame buffer window which shows us the rendered image. We have several channels here that are being part of the render. You will be able to see or switch on or switch off these specific channels. It's advised at the beginning you can keep them and take a look at all the three channels what we are getting. This window you can terminate and then you can also recall this window from the frame buffer menu on the menu bar. So if I launch it again, we know that the last rendered image is available here and we can take a look at it how it was. Also we have something like a region render which we can use it here, so we can only select a specific region to render, and when we say re-render, this is the re-render button on the top right which will help us to re-render the specific region while doing the renders. As you notice now, the rendering is only calculated for the small area that I had selected. This will be helpful for us to do test renders with several change in the material. We can locally select a specific region and render it very quickly to see the result. We would like to now see how the render engine is configurable. If you click on the main button, which is Asset Editor, we can see the settings button on this, and we can start making the changes. As I initially did, we did the interactive render, and the second option we see is here is the progressive. As you know, interactive, we can very quickly see how the render is getting set up, and progressive render we will use it for the production mode. Also, you see there is something called as a quality which controls the output of the render, and we can expand the right panel and we can control a lot of other stuffs here. Since this being the beginner, I am not getting into the more detailed explanation about these things. We can right now set it to quality of maybe draft or low, so we can get the better quality, and then we can fine tune it for the final render. There's also something camera on the bottom here which controls the exposure value, which we can start changing it to a different value. The lower value will give you more brightness and the higher value will give you more darkness. So depending on the requirement, we may have to configure this value. And now we have all set our render engine and camera. To be on the safer side, I'll turn off both interactive and progressive mode. This is a bucket rendering now, which is little faster and a traditional way how the render engine used to work. So if we hit the render, we will get the newer version of the render quality that we can achieve. So let's wait. Right now, though you see there is a light appearing, and this is appearing because there is a sunlight that's enabled. As and when we start the rendering in the SketchUp, normally the sunlight is on and this sun is appearing from the SketchUp, and Vray treats that as a source of light, and it gives us the render. So we will wait for our first render, and there we go, we have the first render appearing. We have already applied several materials in the SketchUp, and when we start setting up in the rendering, it is important to get the lighting proper. I was going through the materials here, and I realized we have a lot of materials that will affect our render. So the way we will start going to the material override and take out all the materials, so it will replace the multi-colors and the texture that whatever we have applied with a override color. The override color can be set to any of the color that we wish, but it is the best way is to use the already preset color, which is gray, and start setting the light after this. So let's Lighting is the hardest part of rendering. It's really critical area wherein we need to know that we have equal or proper ratio of light that is coming from the external source and the light that we are adding internally. It's really important for us to spend more time in getting the lights right in the right location. As you see from the earlier renders, the room is quite dark, and we need to improve the lighting inside the room. The light toolbar from Vray gives us options to add rectangle light, the sphere light, the spotlight. These are the different varieties of lights that are being provided along with the IES light and Omni light. We will be using few of these lights in our tutorial and see how we can build them in our presentation. I was reading in one of the document, it was mentioned the photography is the art of putting the photons and writing your own image. So you are really creating a nice presentation of your 3D model. We will have to make sure you get the lights right, and more and more light you add, the image will look better because the light can reach to each and every corner of the room and you can see things more clearly. Asset editor will provide us access to the lights here, and we see right now we have sunlight. And we can use the button over here to either turn on or turn off the sunlight. Also, we can increase the intensity of the sunlight if we are using it in our workflow. Interior renderings requires kind of a scene light rather than a sunlight alone, so we will be using a dome light technique here, which will bring in additional light into the scene and help us in getting more light instead of a sunlight. So I have turned off the sunlight and I will use a dome light. The dome light we can add additional source which is called as HDRI, high dynamic range image. So to place the dome light, you can click on the dome and then you can place it anywhere in the model. The light will be available inside the scene. Now if I click on the dome light and if I go back to my asset editor, you will see there is a dome light which has appeared, and we can add properties to the dome light. I have already downloaded some of the required stuff for the tutorial, so you can see it. The HDR which I am trying to bring in is having a kind of medium to low tone light. With this advantage is we can illuminate our interior fixture light better, and it will come really nice during the render. So the one which you are seeing is the source, which we will add the HDR light into the dome light. So let's go. We will add dome light. We will be adding the HDRI into the dome light so that we can get the quality of light that we have seen in the HDR image. To click on the mapping, it will take us to the next screen, and here we can browse to the file. The file which I was downloading was called Sky Cloud HDR. You can find all these, some of these in the free internet websites, and you can download them according to your requirement. I am taking one of these files, and now we have taken that particular file in our dome light. Let's go back to the scene and see if we have got the light properly. Now as you see, I have switched off the sunlight and we have the dome light on. So let's click on the render, and now let's see how the quality of light is changing with the dome light. It's important to have a combination of lights running. The best way to have combination is have a dome light with the HDR, which can give you a good quality light. It's very dark right now, but still I can see illumination of light coming from the window. Let's increase it to maybe 10 and then we can continue with the adding additional lights in our workflow. Let's render it with the dome light with the value of 25 and see how the output looks. The room is still dark and we need to add more lights. So now what we will do is we will add additional lights in our presentation so that it looks more bright, and we can use existing dome light and we can continue to add more light. So the next light that we will add will be a rectangle light. Right now, as I'm seeing here, the light which is entering from the window is very dull. So let's go and add a light. So I'm browsing to the location and let's add a rectangle light on the window here. So this light will act as a portal light. This light will act as a portal light, and we need to change it in the settings over here. So this is the rectangle light we have, and now let's see where we can make a change in the control here as a portal light. So this light will be increased with the intensity what we are typing here and the light what is available. Let's go back to the scene and render it again. Now we will be able to see a more brighter light that is coming from the window, and this will be better for our presentation. Along with that, we will add more light. I will stop the render and we will add one more light, maybe at the ceiling here, and it will look much better. Let's take the rectangle light again and we will place it on the ceiling. Make sure when we create the rectangle light, the white surface is illuminating and it is towards our materials where it has to fall. Let's get back now and render it again. Wow, now it looks far better, and we have a light source which is also appearing at the back where the light is entering from the window. It's not very powerful, but it looks much better. Now it is time for us to set up different lights and also more materials. If we look at our frame buffer, the output is better than how it was earlier. Now it is time for us to switch on the materials that we have already captured in the SketchUp. So all we have to do is go back to our settings and remove the material override and take a look at the output, how the render is looking. The materials, whatever we are seeing right now here, is directly coming from the SketchUp, and you might see it. They are all diffused materials, they don't reflect. So we need to add more properties into these materials. Let's try looking at each one of them in detail once the render completes. More the light, more the material, the calculation takes more longer, and the output will be finer and finer. Looking at our frame buffer output, we know that we need to add more quality to our materials what we have. So let's start using the asset editor again and improve the material quality. So if we go into the first icon, which is materials, we can see all the materials that are applied in this particular model. Now to access the material, I will be using paint bucket and as well as the material editor from the Vray. I'll be using the paint bucket. Select window, we will use the copier tool to get the material. Let me take the first one, the veneer material, and now if you go to the asset editor, that particular material is highlighted. The material that we are highlighting in SketchUp gets highlighted in Vray, and the same way the material that we are selecting in the Vray gets highlighted in the SketchUp. So right now, as you see, the veneer is available in both the location, and now let's try to improve it. The major properties what you see here is the diffuse color, the reflection color, refraction color. As you know, the diffuse color is appearing because of the map that's been applied. So we will try to add the reflection quality onto this map by going to the color picker, and we need a reflection of a high quality or a mid-range quality. The more we are into the white, the reflection gets increased. So I'm keeping it to a mid-range. This looks fine. We will terminate that, and we can change the reflection glossiness value. If it is 1, it is highly reflective. We can make it slightly lower value, so we have reflection spread rather than very high reflected material. Now to check that on our model, we will use the region render, which is the one which we can use here, and maybe we will test the region from the top till the bottom and see how the quality of the material is changing. Once we select the region, we will have to re-render it. So let's wait till the calculation again happens for the rendering. Every time we hit render, all the memory of the tool goes back, and it will only calculate the rendering for the one which we have selected. So region render in a way will help us to fine tune the quality of the material faster and quicker. I want to increase the quality of reflection further, so let's go back to the reflection and increase it substantially on the material. So in this way we can make changes on the Vray material that we have already have it from the SketchUp, add the required properties in the Vray material. We have a huge library of Vray materials available. If you expand the left panel, we can see there is a huge material of library available. For the countertop, we can use some granite material here. So I'll go to the stones, and we can now pick and choose any of the material here. Let's bring the material into the scene first. So I'll take this material and add it to the scene. So moment we do that, that material will be available with us in the Vray now, and we can apply it. As you see, this particular material is added in the Vray now, and we can apply this material to our model. Let's use the color copier tool again. We will take the material. So this material needs to be placed on the granite material, which is we have added right now. As you see, when we add the granite material, there is an indication of size. So we need to correct the size once we apply the material. So let's take this material and say use as replacement. So we copy this material, and now we will pick up on the countertop material, which is this one, and we will right click and say use this and replace the existing material with the new one. Moment we do that, you will be able to see that on the model it's already replaced. And let's fix the size by going to the edit material. Let's take the material, edit, and set the size as 80 centimeter. That looks good now, and we can reload our frame buffer. And frame buffer is in the same state as we had created a region render, so we can use the same to test our render again. It will take a minute to reload all the new materials, whatever we have added in the recent change. So there it looks really nice now. With we have more materials with good quality. The advantage of using Vray materials is that you have the setup already created with reflection glossiness, and also many times you will see a bump that is getting added. This is the way you can add more realistic things in your presentation. Don't hesitate to look for the material which has a bump, and the output looks far better than what it was earlier. This is the render image what we are able to get by adding additional material, but we can continue to add more lighting here under the wall panel. So let's go and let's try to add a spotlight. I'll be going very close to the object where we need to place the spotlight. This is the spotlight which we can use it directly. Once you click it, it is looking for a location. This is the newer spotlight available from the Vray team, and if you look at it, once I place it, it will allow us to size. So we can use the scaling tool to size it as much we want. And then if I go back to the Vray now, we have a new element which is Vray spotlight available. We have two parameters which control the spotlight behavior. One is the cone angle and the other one is the penumbra angle. So let's switch on and render it and see how the light looks. So I'll go back to the frame buffer and we will render it, but with a region render, so that we can only render a specific region. After the render, we see that the spotlight is appearing nicely with sharp edges. So let's go and edit the parameters. The parameters which we have to change is the penumbra angle and the cone angle, so we can improve the appearance of the cone and the circular portion here. So I'll change the cone angle to 1.2 maybe, and then we will change the penumbra angle to 0.25 so that we can have a nice spread instead of having a sharp line over here. And let's re-render so that we can see what changes are happening on the cone angle. Also we can click on the color here or here, and we can add a different tone or a color. So right now, as you see, it is white. We are pointed to the white color. We can maybe take a warmer color, something like that. Maybe lighter will be better. So moment I am selecting it, it's automatically taking that particular color. You can also use this color into the swatch by just right clicking on the swatch anywhere, so that color gets stored. Since the render has started earlier, this color is not appearing in the render right now, so let me stop it, and we will do one more region render and see how the output is appearing. Now this is with the color that I have applied specifically on the light. And if you want to swap the color, we can also always pull this and drag it and drop it so that it's back to the white color. So we have a lot of flexibility while preparing the presentation on the rendering using version 3.6. After adding all the materials and lights, the visualization will be improved extensively. So now it is time for us to set up for the final render. I'm going back to the asset editor, onto the settings, and here we can change the render outputs. Let's take that to maybe 1200. The more the image width and the height, the render time will be higher, but at the same time the quality, when you zoom in, it will be much better. So if you want to get better quality, you have to change the size here. Finally, we have to set up some more properties so that we get the output much better. We have something called as render elements. We will switch on denoiser. The denoiser will help us to clean up the noise that we are seeing on the rendered image right now. So there is several amount of noise that the software is calculating, which will be cleaned by the denoiser tool. With this, we should be able to get the final render that we are planning to achieve. Make sure you have applied the material and reflection properties wherever it is really required, and you can use the standard material from the material library to add additional material that you want to have in the your presentation. With that, we will launch the final render. Finally, you can change the quality here from low to medium. Make sure the hardware is sufficiently robust so that you can get the outputs quickly. Now it's time for us to do the final render. There we have the final image. I hope the workflow from SketchUp to Vray was with the material, with the lighting, how to achieve the better quality as we progress on improving the content. It was clear. Please don't hesitate to put your comments. As you know, we are on the internet. It is really helpful for us to understand what is your requirement, so that we can come out with the new videos and help you out with more knowledge. At the same time, please show your appreciation towards the work what we have done. You can contact us for the softwares, solutions, plugins, training, and we will be able to assist you further. Thank you. Enjoy.